The temperature just doubled, not increased, not crept upward gradually, doubled. At Slamet Volcano in Indonesia, the fumarolic temperature inside the crater has jumped to 411 degrees Celsius. That is 772 degrees Fahrenheit. And guys, when I looked at the measurement history for this volcano, when I saw what that number actually represents, I have to say I had to sit with it because that is not a subtle change. That is not background noise in a monitoring data set. That is a volcano telling you something has fundamentally changed inside it, and it gets more serious because the temperature spike is not happening alone. Fractures, new fractures appearing around the crater rim, the ground itself cracking open, splitting apart, circling the summit of one of the most active volcanoes in one of the most volcanically dangerous countries on Earth, Indonesia, a nation sitting on the Pacific Ring of Fire with over 120 active volcanoes. More active volcanoes than any other country on the planet. And right now, one of the most prominent among them is showing signs that volcanologists take very seriously. Rapidly escalating thermal output, structural fracturing around the crater, and a population living on the slopes of this mountain that numbers in the hundreds of thousands. Let me take you through exactly what is happening, what these signals mean scientifically, why the combination of doubled temperature and new fractures is so significant, and what the historical record of Slamet Volcano tells us about what could be coming next. Because further into this video, I am going to show you something about Slamet's eruption history that puts these current signals into a context that is deeply uncomfortable and that most people covering this story are completely missing. So let's start with where we are. Mount Slamet, Central Java, Indonesia, standing at 3,132 meters above sea level. That is 11,860 feet. The highest volcano in Central Java, the second highest peak on the entire island of Java, and sitting right now in the middle of one of the most densely populated regions on Earth. Java is home to approximately 150 million people. That makes it the most densely populated island of its size anywhere on the planet. And Slamet, rising above the cities of Purwokerto, Tegel, Pemalang, Purbalingga, communities whose residents can see this volcano from their windows every morning, is showing signals that have prompted Indonesia's Volcanology Authority, PVMBG, the Center for Volcanology and Geological Hazard Mitigation, to raise its alert level. Now let's talk about these numbers, because 411 degrees Celsius needs context to understand why it matters. Fumarolic temperatures, the temperatures measured at the gas vents inside a volcanic crater, are one of the most direct indicators of what is happening in the magma system below. These temperatures are not constant, they fluctuate. They respond to changes in the volcanic system. When magma rises closer to the surface, when fresh, hot, gas-rich magma moves upward through the conduit, the thermal energy it carries heats the hydrothermal system above it, the groundwater, the rock, the gas pathways, and the temperature at the fumaroles rises. The doubling of temperature at Slamet from previous baseline measurements to 401 degrees Celsius indicates that something below the surface has changed significantly. Either magma has moved closer to the surface, or the volume of hot volcanic gas being injected into the hydrothermal system has increased dramatically, or both. And 401 degrees Celsius is not a temperature you dismiss. At that temperature, the gas emerging from those fumaroles is hot enough to ignite organic material on contact, hot enough to cause severe burns instantaneously, hot enough to tell any experienced volcanologist this system is energizing. And now, the fractures. New cracks appearing around the crater rim, circling the summit. And I have to explain what that means structurally, because this is the detail that elevates this situation beyond just a thermal anomaly. When fractures appear around a volcanic crater rim, there are several possible causes. The first and most benign is purely thermal expansion. As the crater heats up, as rocks are subjected to rapidly increasing temperatures, they expand, and cracking can result. The second possibility, more concerning, is inflation of the volcanic edifice. As magma rises and accumulates at shallow depth, the ground above it inflates. swells outward, and that swelling puts the surrounding rock under tension. When rock under tension exceeds its strength, it fractures. The pattern of fractures circling the crater rim is consistent with inflation-driven tensional cracking. The rock is being pulled apart because something below is pushing upward. And the third possibility, the one that demands the most serious attention, is that these fractures represent the beginning of structural destabilization of the crater walls. Volcanic crater walls, particularly in stratovolcanoes like Slamet, are built up of alternating layers of lava and loose volcanic material. Ash deposits, scoria, unconsolidated tephra. When those walls are heated rapidly from below, when they are fractured from thermal stress and inflation, their structural integrity weakens, and weakened crater walls above an energizing magmatic system create conditions where explosive eruption becomes more likely because the pressure containment above the rising magma has been compromised. Now let's talk about the people. Because this is not happening in an uninhabited wilderness. This is not Kilauea's remote summit caldera. This is not Antarctica. This is central Java. Villages and towns sit on the slopes of Slamet. Agricultural communities, tea plantations, coffee farms, vegetable growing areas, families who have farmed these slopes for generations because the soil on volcanic slopes, built up from centuries of ashfall and weathered lava, is extraordinarily fertile, and that fertility has drawn people to live in the shadow of this volcano for as long as anyone can remember. PVMBG has established an exclusion zone around the summit. Residents within that zone have been advised to stay out, but exclusion zones are defined by administrative boundaries, not by where volcanic hazards actually stop. Pyroclastic flows, lahars, volcanic mud flows, ballistic projectiles from explosive eruptions. These hazards do not stop at the exclusion zone boundary. They go where physics and gravity take them, and on a volcano as tall as Slamet, on slopes this steep, in terrain this complex, those hazards can travel far. One farmer, quoted in Indonesian media coverage of the current alert, said he has watched Slamet his entire life. His father watched it. His grandfather watched it. He said, "I know when the mountain is restless. Right now it is restless. And when this man, who has spent his entire life reading this volcano, says the mountain is restless, that deserves the same weight as any instrument reading. Before we go deeper into the science, can you do me a favor? If this is giving you information about a situation that almost nobody outside Indonesia is covering right now, give this video a like and a hype. Share it. Leave me a comment. Tell me, did you know Slamet was showing these signals right now? Most people watching this had no idea. It helps the channel enormously and costs you nothing at all. All right, let's go into the science, because to fully understand why the combination of doubled fumarolic temperature and new crater fractures at Slamet is so significant, you need to understand what kind of volcano Slamet actually is and what it is capable of. Slamet is a stratovolcano, also called a composite volcano. This is the volcanic type that produces the most dangerous eruptions on Earth, not the broad flowing lava eruptions of shield volcanoes like Kilauea, where lava moves relatively slowly and people have time to evacuate. Stratovolcanoes erupt differently. Their magma is more viscous, higher in silica content. It traps gas more effectively, and when that trapped gas finally overcomes the pressure above it, the eruption can be violently explosive. Pyroclastic flows, surges of superheated gas and volcanic material moving at hundreds of kilometers per hour. Ash columns rising tens of kilometers into the atmosphere, lahars triggered by eruption, melting crater ice, or mixing with rainfall, traveling down river valleys, burying everything in their path. This is the eruptive style that stratovolcanoes are capable of. This is what Mount Pinatubo produced in 1991. What Merapi, just 150 kilometers east of Slamet, produces regularly, what Krakatau produced in 1883, and Slamet is a stratovolcano with a doubling of its fumarolic temperature, with new fractures circling its crater in the most densely populated island on Earth. Now, Let's talk about the specific chemistry that makes these thermal signals so informative. The gases emerging from Slamet's fumaroles are not just hot air, they are a chemical fingerprint of what is happening at depth. PVMBG and associated research institutions analyze the composition of these gases continuously. Specifically, they look at ratios: the ratio of SO2 to CO2, the ratio of H2S to SO2, water vapor content, and the presence of magmatic gases versus hydrothermal gases. Here is why this matters. CO2, carbon dioxide, is released from magma at greater depths. It exsolves from the melt at higher pressures. So elevated CO2 in fumarolic emissions often indicates magma at depth. SO2, sulfur dioxide, is released at shallower depths, lower pressures. When SO2 begins increasing relative to CO2, when the ratio shifts, it tells scientists that magma has risen closer to the surface, close enough that the lower pressure SO2 exsolution is occurring, and rising SO2 output combined with rapidly increasing fumarolic temperatures is one of the clearest pre-eruptive signals that volcanology has. This is the signal combination that preceded the 2014 eruption of Ontake volcano in Japan. Though that system gave scientists very little time, this is the combination seen before the 1963 eruption of Agung in Bali, before the 2010 eruption of Merapi, which killed over 350 people despite modern monitoring and evacuations. And this combination is what PVMBG is now watching at Slamet, with temperatures that have doubled and fractures that are new. Now, I want to take you through the historical record of Slamet, because I did a little research, and what this volcano has done in the past tells us a great deal about what it could do again. Slamet has a well-documented eruption history stretching back centuries. It is one of the most frequently active volcanoes in Java. In the modern instrumental record alone, Slamet has produced significant eruptive episodes in 1999, 2009, 2014, and 2020. That is 4 notable eruptive periods in just 25 years. The 2014 eruption was particularly significant. PVMBG raised the alert level to the second highest status. Exclusion zones were enforced around the summit. The eruption produced ash columns reaching several kilometers into the atmosphere. Volcanic material was ejected from the crater, and communities on the flanks experienced ash fall that damaged crops and disrupted daily life. But the 2014 eruption, as significant as it was not Slamet's largest historical event. Geological research into Slamet's deeper history has revealed evidence of much larger explosive eruptions in the past, events that deposited significant volumes of pyroclastic material across the surrounding landscape, evidence preserved in the geological stratigraphy of the region, of eruptions that would today have severe consequences for the densely populated communities surrounding the volcano. And here is something that I found that stopped me cold. Slamet is not just one volcanic structure. Geological mapping has revealed that the current Slamet cone is built on the remnants of an older, larger volcanic edifice, an ancestral Slamet that at some point in the geological past experienced a major sector collapse, a partial flank failure. The evidence is in the landscape, the asymmetric morphology of the mountain. The debris avalanche deposits that geological surveys have identified on the northwestern flank, the same style of structural history that we have seen at other Indonesian volcanoes, and that in some cases has preceded renewed large-scale activity. Slamet has a history of being more than it currently appears, and right now it is showing us signals that suggest it is building towards something. What scale? We cannot say, but building. Now let's talk about the broader Indonesian volcanic context, because Slamet does not exist in isolation. It exists in a country where volcanic hazard management is one of the most complex and consequential challenges in the world. Indonesia sits at the collision of the Indo-Australian plate, subducting beneath the Eurasian plate, along the Java Trench, one of the deepest ocean trenches on Earth. That subduction feeds magma upward into the chain of volcanoes that lines the islands of Sumatra, Java, Bali, Lombok, the Sunda Arc. and Java alone has more potentially dangerous volcanoes per square kilometer of populated land than almost anywhere else on Earth. Merapi, Semeru, Bromo, Kelud, Raung, and Slamet, all of them active, all of them monitored by PVMBG, all of them surrounded by millions of people, and right now, Slamet is the one showing the sharpest escalation in its monitoring data, the doubled temperature, the new fractures, the elevated alert status. Now, what is PVMBG specifically doing and watching, and what should we be tracking as this situation develops? First, seismic monitoring. Slamet is instrumented with seismometers that track earthquake activity beneath the volcano. The critical signals here are volcanic tremor, a continuous seismic signal caused by moving magma or volcanic gases, and the depth and frequency of discrete earthquakes beneath the summit. If shallow seismicity increases dramatically, if volcanic tremor amplitude grows, those are signals that magma is moving closer to the surface. PVMBG releases daily seismic bulletins for Slamet. Right now, those bulletins are being read very carefully. Second, ground deformation monitoring. GPS and tiltmeter data from Slamet tells scientists whether the volcanic edifice is inflating, whether magma is accumulating at shallow depth. Accelerating inflation, particularly in the area of the new crater fractures, would be a critical escalation signal. Third, visual and thermal observations. PVMBG maintains observation posts around Slamet, staffed observers who watch the crater continuously, thermal cameras that track surface temperature changes. If the fractures widen, if new fumarolic vents open, if crater morphology changes significantly, these observers will see it first. Fourth, gas flux measurements. DOSE instruments, differential optical absorption spectroscopy, measure SO2 output from the volcano remotely. A significant increase in SO2 flux, particularly if it crosses thresholds seen before previous eruptive episodes, would be a major escalation signal. And fifth, the exclusion zone, currently enforced at a radius that reflects the current alert level. If PVMBG raises that alert level further, if the exclusion zone expands, that communicates volumes about what the monitoring data is showing behind the scenes. Watch the exclusion zone. It is the most direct expression of official scientific concern. Now, let me address something directly, because when we talk about Indonesian volcanoes, when we talk about volcanic hazards in densely populated regions, we have to talk about what makes the human risk here so profound. It is not just the volcano, it is the combination of the volcano and the reality of life on its slopes. Many communities on Slamet's flanks, particularly agricultural communities at mid-elevation, have limited mobility, limited transport access. Many residents are elderly. Many have livestock they cannot simply abandon. Many have farms that represent their entire livelihood that they cannot walk away from without devastating their family's economic survival. This is the human reality of volcanic hazard in places like Central Java. The choice between safety and survival is not always clear, and it is not always a choice at all. PVMBG and local government authorities work hard to communicate risk, to coordinate evacuations when necessary, to establish refuge areas. But the complexity of moving hundreds of thousands of people from the slopes of a mountain that has been their home for generations, on the timeline that a suddenly escalating volcano may provide, that complexity is real. And it is exactly why early warning matters so much, why monitoring data matters so much, why every degree of temperature increase, every new fracture, every seismic signal needs to be taken seriously before the window for orderly evacuation closes. So guys, let's bring this together. Slamet Volcano in Central Java, Indonesia. Fumarolic temperature doubled to 401 degrees Celsius, 772 degrees Fahrenheit. New fractures circling the crater rim. Alert level raised by PVMBG, a stratovolcano capable of explosive pyroclastic eruptions, surrounded by some of the most densely populated terrain on Earth, with a historical record showing repeated significant eruptive episodes and geological evidence of larger events in its deeper past. The signals right now: doubled temperature, new fractures, elevated seismicity, are not background noise. They are a volcanic system communicating that something has changed below the surface, that energy is increasing, that pressure is building, and that the people living on this mountain slopes deserve every second of warning that science can provide them. I will stay on this story. If PVMBG raises the alert level further, you will know immediately. If seismic data shows escalation toward eruptive activity, I will break it down for you. If an eruption begins, you will hear it here first with the full scientific context. Check the end screen for my other videos on Indonesian volcanic hazards and the broader story of what is happening along the Pacific Ring of Fire right now. Because Slamet is not erupting in isolation. The whole arc is watching. If you want to support the channel, the coffee link is in the description. No brands, no promotions. Just keeping this running so I can stay on the pulse for you. Thank you to everyone watching, everyone sharing, everyone leaving comments. You are why this exists. Stay safe, guys. Be aware. Bye-bye.